Hello students and parents, hope you're doing well. We're going to continue. This is a very easy passage to read, so use your reading card for those of you who are struggling with your fluency a little bit. Those of you who are really good readers, read it once a day. That'd be 2 or 3 days that you read it and be done with it. You don't have to read it over and over again if once you've read it through you have successfully read it at least 140 words a minute and you aren't getting stuck in any of the vocabulary. Also, we're looking at how writers actually write introductions, body, and conclusions so we can have examples of writing our own narratives. And that's really the point of this particular piece. It's written in the first person, which is the I person. That's the person who's actually viewing and writing about the events in front of them. Follow this closely, and this will dovetail along with what we're looking at in our writing for this week. Here's our reading passage for week 21. My sister is a night owl. This is another short and relatively easy passage. It's included some dialogue here. And if you notice, each of these have their own paragraph. Anytime anyone speaks in a narrative, they get their own paragraph. And so those of you who are good readers probably will be successful reading this just one time through, maybe twice, and then you'll be reading 120 to 140 words a minute, maybe even past that. So you don't need to read this every single day, twice a day. You might just read this once every other day, and that would be fine with me. If you're a struggling reader, this is a great passage to practice your fluency with. So we're going to use our reading card and our mind's eye to practice reading this relatively straightforward passage. And remember how you use a reading card. You use it at the top of the page, and as you read, you cover up the parts that you've already read. Don't use it as the bottom, because that's where your eyes need to go. It'll be a little bit like driving a car with blindfolders on. We don't want that to happen. So we're going to use it at the top and cover up sentences as we read. As you get better at this, you can cover up your sentences before your voice even mentions these words that you've covered up, because your mind's eye already knows what those words are. So let me demonstrate through the passage. And if you're a struggling fluency reader, please have a reading card handy. And these are very easy to get. Every store sells them. Start at the top of the page. And as you read and finish that sentence, cover it up. I keep asking my mom if I could have my own room. That's because I'm tired of sharing a room with my little sister. So you notice in that first paragraph how I covered up the words underneath the card, even because my mind has already seen that through my eyes, and my voice is just kind of remembering what my mind's eye said or saw, and I can go ahead and just read. This is a very powerful practice in increasing your fluency. Maria is my 6-year-old sister, and she's a night owl. If Maria were an animal, you'd probably say that she was nocturnal. Okay, so we have maybe a vocabulary word here. She's like a bat at night. Every night, just as I close my eyes, Maria wants to talk. You might think that she eats candy before bed, but no. My mom doesn't let us have sugar before bed. In our dark bedroom, we sound like this. Maria. Do you want to know who my best friend is? Me. No. Maria. Can I tell you what Ethan did at recess? Me. No. Even as a baby, Maria had a hard time falling asleep. My mom would rock her. My mother would sing to her, but Maria just babbled. Maybe this might be a vocabulary word. My mom was worried for a while. She wanted to know if Maria was tired at school, but the teacher said, no, she's a firecracker. I've learned to fall asleep as Maria talks and talks. I asked my mom again about having my own room, but my mom says that we don't have a spare room. I told her that I could sleep in the living room, but then again, I am so used to hearing Maria at night that the silence might be too much for me. So practice using your mind's eye and covering up parts of the sentence that your voice hasn't gotten to yet, but your mind's eye knows what the words are. Okay, so that's our first read. We have a couple words over here, nocturnal and babbled. These might be ones that you want to use for your vocabulary down here. But within the text, authors often give us clues of what like nocturnal might be. She's like a bat at night. So bats only come out at night. So that's a clue of what nocturnal might mean. Babbled is a sound that babies make, but you might want to look this up just to get some other definitions for that. So let's go ahead and number our paragraphs. Now you notice down here when each of these characters in the narrative speak, they get their own paragraph. A paragraph is an indentation and a capital. So here we have in paragraph 1 an indentation and a capital. Indentation and a capital. Here's an indentation and a capital. So this would be paragraph 3. This would be paragraph 4, 5, 6, 7. They happen really quickly right after each other if you include a dialogue along in your narrative, which you'll do, because when we write narratives, people are talking, and authors put down what people are saying, so every person gets their own paragraph. Then we go down to 8 down here, and we go down to 9, and that's the end. There's no more indentations with capitals down here. So this is 9 paragraphs, which is a lot. Now, in the genre, we have to determine whether this is imaginary or whether it's factual. So is Maria a made-up character, or is Maria a real person? Is the person telling the story actually in their real house talking to their real mom? I would have to say that in this case that it was fiction. That means this is imaginary. An author came up with this. So this would be fiction. But it does seem real, because we do have problems with, kids wanting their own rooms, and maybe you had some difficulty with your younger sisters or brothers. Okay. So even though this is fiction, it seems real. There's a whole category for stories that are like that. And this is called realistic fiction. It's almost saying the opposite thing here. So I just wanted you to make sure that you understand this is fiction, but it seems realistic. So they put these two words together, what seems like they're the opposite of each other. That's kind of crazy. But the genre here would be realistic fiction. Now, we could also put narrative over here, but we're going to move narrative now over to our structure here, because the author crafted this in a way where he used different techniques to make this seem like it's real. One technique is he used dialogue. Okay, and that has a weird spelling on the end, the UE. He used dialogue as part of the structure. That's right here part, that part here. And he also used this as a narrative. Okay, now normally our narratives go over here. When you write your own narrative, it's going to be your own genre over here. In this case, he used a narrative as part of the structure. And did this start from a beginning and kind of go to the end? Sequence is kind of questionable here. So there's not really a sequence in here. It didn't happen in the morning and then go to the afternoon and then go to the evening. So I think that's the only two things that they use for this imaginary narrative. Well, let's look at the other thing that's important about writing that we're going to be following in our own writing. This is this is one part of the story. This is another part of it. Okay, and they're usually given their own paragraphs. And this is another part of it. Do you remember what we call these? Think about that for a moment. They're going to be in all our passages. If you said introduction, you're correct here. I like to think of the introduction and the conclusion as almost the same, and I kind of gave you the clue down here. This is the conclusion. And what do we call the part in the center? It's kind of like a sandwich. This is called the body. Now our introduction answers what questions? Does anyone remember that? Who did what? When and where? Oh, that's where. So that's what an introduction, those are the questions that this part of our narrative has to answer. Who did what, when, and where? And all writing has an introduction that has some form of this in it, pretty consistently. So I asked my mom. So let's look at the who. Who, we have the I, we have the mom. Because I'm tired of sharing my room with my little sister, and we have little sister. So here's all our characters in our story just in the introduction. She introduces all of them right here in the first paragraph. Did what? Let's look at that one. Did what? This one's not real clear, but we could say she wants her own room because I'm tired of sharing a room. She did what? She wants her own room. And that's this I wants her own room. And we don't have a name for her because she's writing the narrative. It's a little bit like when you take a picture of someone and you're the one taking the picture. We have what's called selfies, but if you were to stand back and take a picture of a group, there'd be everybody in that group except you. And so you wouldn't be included in that picture. That's kind of what I is kind of like in these sentences. We don't know who this person is. We don't have a picture of them, but they're telling the story. Did what, when? Like I said, we don't have any sequence to this, so we can't tell if she's talking to her mom at the morning or midday, at a table. We don't know where this is. We can assume that it's at a house, but when is kind of a question mark. So we'll just leave a question mark there. They don't answer that one very well. Where? Well, we're going to say, remember we had our great topics? So this was at the house. And maybe even more specifically, the bedroom. All right. And that kind of completes whether or not this is a really good introduction. They didn't give us the when, but they gave us everything else. So go ahead and copy this down. This is our sample. and we'll look at some other parts of this passage in the next video.